Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. I am Napah Shadah, and I am hosting today a very interesting, dare I say, amazing guest who has really been on um, a, an extraordinary spiritual journey from Christianity all the way to Buddhism and everything in between. Clare Goldsberry. Clare Goldsberry is here with us today. So I'm welcoming you, Clare. Peace to you.
Thank you.
Clare is a writer who is continually examining spirit and religion. She has authored several essays and books. One that we will particularly be speaking to her about today is her book, The Illusion of Life and Death, Mind, Consciousness, and Eternal Being. Clare's writings often discuss life's truth from a spiritual and metaphysical perspective, which, according to her experience, death is just as essential on our journey as life is. Clare has received her bachelor's in journalism from Arizona State University and has studied a varying list of religions from Mormonism, Theosophy, as I mentioned, Gnosticism. She's really had a very interesting spiritual journey. At the moment, Clare is a practicing Buddhist, and we will speak to her a bit about how her Buddhism shapes her perspective and her philosophy on the afterlife and life itself. So, again, welcome to you, Clare.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, I'm very happy to have you here. Before we get into speaking to you about your philosophy on death, I don't usually use the word death, and I want to talk to you about that too. I want to get your advice on it. But on death, the afterlife. Before we even talk to you about that, I really would like for you to go into your you as a child, because when I read The Divine Heart, 7 Ways to Live in God's Love, I love the portion of the book where you say early on at 7 years old, you realize the vastness and the oneness and God connected with you. If I'm not putting it correctly or very well, please articulate it for us.
Well, as a child growing up in mainstream Protestant Christianity, I really just questioned a lot of why people have the life they have. Why was my life different than other people's lives? I would sit in church when we were doing our mission nights because we had Christian missionaries that we sponsored. And at the time, it was called the Belgian Congo. This was back in the 1950s. And I would wonder why did those children have the life they had and I have the life I have? I mean, it seemed so different. And I felt like I was so lucky that I had, the life that I had and had everything I wanted. I had ponies when I wanted them. I had horses when I wanted them. I was really fortunate. And I go, why my life and not that life? And I always looked at that as like the big question. What is life? What is my life compared to other people's lives? And I really began to question God and to question, because I was brought up knowing, believing, taught by my parents that God loves everybody equally. So then why do we all have different lives? And do we all have different experiences in our lifetimes? And I think that's what kind of got me started on this path and looking at, well, what is the truth? What is the truth for my life? And I began looking at various other religions, and just out of the blue, I met, a Mormon. And so I had the Mormon experience. And as I've moved along through my life, I really became acquainted with what is my truth. And that became the important thing. The Illusion of Life and Death was written out of a journal that I kept when Brent was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And I began to understand that death is as important as life, even though I've often said it doesn't matter how you die, it's how you live that matters, because often we don't have control over how we die. We don't know how we're going to die, although I've heard that we kind of know when we're going to die, that it's somewhere there in our consciousness, that maybe we've been shown the movie before we came here in this lifetime. And what did the movie entail? And yet we agreed to come, we agreed to have this life. And so it was really all a part of this, finding what my truth was. And the illusion of life and death comes out of that. And yes, I've had a lot of different experiences and studied a lot of different religions. And yet I find that there's some threads of similarities in a lot of these things. And I think that finding truth is something that people don't think about until they're confronted with some major event in life. And I think death is one of those major events that I don't think people really have a good feeling about. And you talk about using the word death. I've used the word transition. People don't like the word death, but they don't like the word death maybe for a different reason than you don't care to use the word death. Because we do know that there is life, that life goes on, because consciousness is eternal. Consciousness is where we're always conscious on some level. As perhaps that I have 2 chapters in the book about consciousness. So we're always conscious on some level. So we can talk about, because when people think of death, they think of an ending. You're not here anymore, so nothing exists. And yet everything that we've ever done, spoken, thought exists through consciousness on some level of consciousness. And there are many levels of consciousness. I think consciousness has been said that it's the last frontier, the mind, and how consciousness and the mind, what is mind, what is consciousness? And I think in looking at that, I began to believe that if we understood consciousness, if we understood how our mind functions, we will have an easier life and definitely an easier death. And so that's the reason that I wanted to write this book and to express those thoughts about death and dying, about consciousness, about where do we go? People believe in reincarnation. Some people don't believe in reincarnation. So I put it together to kind of help people understand that it's all an illusion. And that comes also from my studies of quantum physics, which the book also covers. So that's in a nutshell, probably the last, 70 years of my life.
Well, you know what? I thank you for touching on the consciousness and the quantum physics. I think I don't know if it's just something that we have this universal mind or this universal consciousness where we're all magnetizing toward this understanding that mainstream science and what they might say the metaphysical are not really separate. I do want to comment on what you said. You said go with the flow in your speech just now. Can we go to, oh, sorry. I'd like to go to where you spoke with your soulmate, Brent. And you mentioned how he was just, for me, I call it easygoing. He's just like flow. And he wasn't a Buddhist. That's the irony. You're the Buddhist. He wasn't any, talk to us about him. I love how you represent him in the book, where he's just, for me, I just see someone who's so balanced and in tune and free, but no religion actually that he's practicing. Can you speak about that?
Well, you're right. He really didn't believe in any particular religion. He didn't know anything about Buddhism when we met. I had just started studying it seriously when we met. And yet he lived a life that not very many people are able to live. He lived a life that was easy, and he sort of embraced all as the path. And I say that because that's kind of a Buddhist thing, you know, embrace all as the path. And he did that without any real belief system, without any real belief in God or Jesus. His family really didn't go to church, and you know, unlike my family, we were there every Sunday for everything and days in between. And he didn't have that experience, and yet he seemed so much more in tune with life and with his dying process and death than I could have ever been, even with all of my religious background and religious training. And I think that I don't know what the answer is to why he was that way, other than a past life, many past lives.
Yes. Wow, I love talking to you because I believe in past lives, and I'm not a Buddhist. I'm actually I subscribe to the Bible, but I look at the Bible in a different way. And I think that it's beautiful how you say, life goes on. We don't die. We don't need to fear death. And you talk about Brent in that way. He was just like, wow, I didn't know dying was this easy. I want you to talk to us about, if you, in your teachings and in your, from your experience, is fear the big deal with people and death, and how he wasn't, from your perspective, he wasn't afraid? Is fear the issue? One of the issues?
I think fear is the biggest issue. Fear drives people's lives. I mean, it truly does. You look around, especially today, and fear is everywhere. And I used to be kind of fearful of things. And then what brought me around was my Buddhist studies. And also Hinduism. I've studied in the past 5 years. I've read a lot of books on Hinduism, a lot of academic books on Hinduism, and the idea that fear can actually destroy you. In fact, fear can destroy you when other things wouldn't. Fear can be a huge obstacle to living the life you're intended to live, to living your authentic life. And I think that fear is more damaging than almost anything. And being around Brent when he was going through, the diagnosis and his surgery, and the dying process, and seeing how totally unfearful he was, like, it's just another excellent adventure. As he said, after he got this diagnosis, it was just like, it's okay. There was no fear there at all. And I think that's what really helped me incorporate that fearlessness into my life, because seeing that and reading about it in Buddhism and Hinduism, and seeing how fear is such an obstruction to living, I began to be able to throw that off and really open myself up to fearlessness and living a fearless life. And I can't say that it's easy. I can't say that I'm there where Brent was and at that point in his life, but it's become a lot easier. And one of my goals is to help people understand that there's really nothing to be afraid of, that fear is really an obstacle and not a way to live our lives.
Right, thank you. Speaking about the Eastern belief and reincarnation, that helps us. There's no fear if I'm not gone forever. I'm just, my spirit, my consciousness is going on. And I like to see it as if the material body, the flesh can't sustain the spirit, we will be able to get another chance, another body. The reason I'm prefacing a question about the Christian and the Western religion. Okay, so
Right.
we look at it from that perspective, and then it's like, well, this isn't my only go round. I can come back and try again. Do you think that Western religion, Christianity especially, doesn't that's not taught because of some type of control, or you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think they don't want us to know, oh, you mean this isn't my only life? You know, is there something going on there? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, yes, I think there has always been that influence in the Western world. You know, Christianity has been a tremendous influence. And when you look at, you say you come from a biblical standpoint, even in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, in the Gospels, there's a point where Jesus' disciples ask him, or he was talking with them, and Jesus asked him, "Who do men say that I am?" And they said, "Well, some say you're Elijah or Elisha or one of the prophets." So there was this idea that maybe one of the prophets had come back as Jesus. And of course, then there's the father that who sinned? Was it this man, or was it his parents that sinned? Why is this man blind? Was it him? Did he do something wrong, or was it his parents? This idea that we can pass down through lifetimes. Well, we wouldn't call it karma. They wouldn't have called it karma, but this idea of karma that goes through lifetime after lifetime. When you talk about the idea that, I, Clare, am going to have subsequent lifetimes, I've had past lives, I will have future lives. And in the Buddhist sense, there is no I. You've heard about the idea of no self, no inherently existent self that goes on. There is the essence of my lifetimes that I can remain through my consciousness, through my conscious essence, that I go, but I'm not Clare. Clare didn't do this in a past lifetime, that sort of thing. People like to think that they will exist forever. You will exist in a way, but not as not as you in every single lifetime. It's kind of tough to explain and difficult to understand, but the essence of you, everything you have learned goes on, and you keep building on that. You never really, some people remember their past lives, and they say that we do up until the time we're about 6 or 7. And then we kind of start losing that memory. The veil gets more dense, it begins closing off, and we don't remember. But there's been a lot of studies in past lives. A lot of different people have written books about children and their past lives that people can read, and you can see, I don't think everybody has to believe in reincarnation, just like you don't have to believe in karma. But I always tell people, karma is like gravity. It doesn't matter whether you believe in it. It's happening to you every day. So.
I was muted. Yes, I completely agree with you. I love what you're saying. Wow. If I may share a little bit of my mind with you, I tell people, my clients, and anyone who wants to listen, I teach that we are like, it's like it's like a snowball. We're like going through these lives and accumulating this consciousness. So I love what you said. I really resonate with everything you're saying. I want to talk to you about karma. I have heard you. I did listen to you on an interview. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't remember what interview it was. You've done many. And I love what you were saying about karma, because we always see karma as punishment, punitive. So talk to us about karma and your philosophy on karma.
Well, that's the problem when people talk about karma that don't really understand it, because they think of karma as something that's retributive. You know, you're getting retribution for something you did either in this life, or if not in this life, then in a past life. And karma is basically just means action. In Sanskrit, it's just action, and there's no judgment about a good action or bad action. But the idea that all of our actions, body, speech, and mind, have consequences. What you think, what you say, and what you do have consequences. So you're always creating consequences every moment of your life, because we're always thinking, we're always doing something, we're always speaking. And so just being aware that everything that we do, body, speech, and mind, have these consequences. And when our intent, and in Buddhism, intention is everything, when our intent is to help people, to try to do good for people, when we try to be the best person we can be, there's karma connected with that. When we do terrible things to other people, when we say bad things, when we say things that are negative to other people or things that hurt people, then that is also karma. It creates karma. And so it's just the consequences. It's not that we really judge anything as being good or bad. There's no such thing as bad karma or good karma. It's just karma. It's just action, and everything has a consequence. And I think remembering that really helps us deal with the world, deal with our everyday life. And I think that, you remember that, I don't know if you ever saw that TV show years ago, My Name is Earl. And it was back in the early, early first decade of this century, maybe the early 2000s. And he wins the lottery, and then he gets hit by a truck and he loses all the money that he was carrying. And he said, okay, that's karma. And so he ran around trying to make up with everybody that he'd ever hurt. And I think that kind of gave people this kind of weird idea about karma. They've got to run around and apologize to everybody they've ever hurt and so forth. And I think we do get those opportunities lifetime after lifetime. They say that one of the reasons we tend to stay in family groups lifetime after lifetime is those are the people that we create the most karma with. So that to me made sense when I heard that. I thought, that makes sense.
Oh, wow. So in reincarnation, what you're saying is we do reincarnate to the same family?
I think we can. I think depending on maybe karmic elements connected with the family. I think some families, that I've had personal experiences that show me that the karmic elements that are created tend to create the causes and conditions for us to be reincarnated in that family group over and over. Now, it doesn't mean that other groups can't come into that. We all meet new people, we have new experiences. We marry people and enter into other family groups. So I think that, nothing is cut and dry, because everything is causes and conditions. What are the causes and conditions that give us the opportunities to reincarnate into the life that we need to always advance spiritually? I like the idea of the snowball. That's really good. You just keep kind of collecting things. because, it's how do you know? How did I come here? Just interested in religion from the time I was a little kid, wanting to be a minister and studying and, I mean, it's like you come with this mind, with this consciousness of who you are and what you need to do. And I guess I've just kind of always had that. And I just keep learning and growing and learning and growing and, and here I am.
And you're awesome. I love how you've tapped in. What do you think about that? Like, we hear you just spoke on it, the Akashic records and our past lives. Do you think, and there, that is a doctor, I forgot his name. He's in Virginia. He works with children with past life experiences.
Edgar Casey.
Thank
Edgar
you.
Casey, yeah.
Okay, so what do you like? What are some of the ways, besides meditation, and possibly fasting? What other ways can we really get in tune? It's you said something about density in the veil. I love that you said that because the veil is very thin right now. But I digress. So how can we? What are some of the ways that we can try to focus on that particular consciousness, that part of our consciousness? Is there a way to tap into our past lives, or make sure we don't make the mistakes that we made before? Anything like that?
Well, I'm not sure that there's an instruction booklet that goes with that. People do meditate. I've never been a good meditator. I'm more of a contemplator. I find myself just and a daydreamer. I find myself just thinking about things, or I read a lot, I study a lot, and that triggers certain thoughts, certain ideas. But people do meditate and find ways to tap into that through meditation. I have found that my inner voice just comes on when I need it to. And sometimes I'm just doing regular stuff and all of a sudden, bam, there it is. There's something I had been thinking about and then just set aside, and then it comes. So I don't know that there's any particular instruction booklet with, the 12 steps to enlightenment or anything like that. I think it comes when you need it. If you're aware, if you have this awareness, this consciousness that there are things out there that are available to us, and not just close ourselves off and think, well, I'll never know that. I'll never, but stay open to what's there. Stay open to the little voices that come from here, that come from there, the experiences that you have, and be open to everything. Sometimes people just think if they, sit on the cushion 24 hours a day, they're going to be enlightened, and not really. The Buddha, when he was an ascetic, he tried that. He was down to, so they say, 1 grain of rice a day. He had fasted so much that he was thin, he was near death, and he still hadn't obtained enlightenment. And so it's when he sat down under the Bodhi tree and decided, okay, this is it, then he got enlightened. So it's like, when you give it up, it all comes to you. Everything comes to you when you need it, and at the perfect time that you need it.
Wow. You're like a tree that we're sitting under and we're grabbing all the great fruit. Really, I appreciate your information, and you're very humble about it. I don't even think you know how amazing this information is. People need to hear this because there's so many people with that blocked mind, the Western philosophy. I'm afraid of death. There's nothing out there. Atheism is on the rise in a lot of communities. I want to ask you, I'm going to get into talking about conventional medicine and end of life, but I want to ask you this before we move away from what we're talking about. What about those who have transitioned, those who have died, like your loved one, your soulmate, Brent? Is there a connection, you know what I'm saying, with us in our physical material selves? Do we get messages? Because I love how you said listen to the voices. Could some of those voices possibly be people who have moved on?
I believe so. Yes, yes, it can be. I can't say that I have had any specific person or someone that I thought was a specific person. When I was a child and my inner voice would come on, I used to say, well, that's God talking to me. And as I grew up and kind of got different ideas about things, I think it was just my divine inner mind, my divine mind or universal mind. In Gnosticism, we might call that the spark, that spark that's within all of us that keep us connected to things like the Akashic field that help us to understand. And I think a lot of times people just aren't trained to listen for that. You talked about, does Christianity impact the way we feel about death? Well, definitely, when we're told that we have this one life to live, you better get it right, because if you don't get it right, it isn't going to be good in your eternal life. And I think that's very disturbing. And you look at, I believe it was in the Nicene Council that eliminated a lot of the wording about reincarnation and rebirth, because it benefited the church at the time, the Roman Catholic Church, to tell people they only have this one life to get it right. And they would do things like, pay indulgences, pay the church to get their relatives out of purgatory. There was meaning. There's always a reason for everything. Everybody's got a motive for everything they do. And I think that the motive was, of course, to keep people within the fold of the church at that time and keep them adhering to the law, because unfortunately, even though Jesus came to teach love, the church that evolved in his name afterward was all about law and adhering to the law. It's always the law versus love. And of course, the Apostle Paul said, if you have love, that's really all you need. And so I think that people aren't aware of their inner voice. People aren't aware that there are more things out there that maybe can touch them, but really it's all in here. You'll hear something out there and it touches something in here. That happens to me so often, like every day, whether I'm reading or whether I'm looking at, a bit of news or whatever, and it touches something in here in my mind, which is in the heart chakra, that tells me something I need to know. And, we just don't look at that. We don't listen to that. We don't see that for what it is. And I think Edgar Cayce had a gift. And I think we all have the potential for something similar, maybe not to the degree he had it, but we certainly have that potential to listen for whatever voices there are out there that can teach us.
Well, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about science and energy not dying. It just changes. So would you say, would you be comfortable saying, okay, so this is immortality? I mean, I know you touched on it already, but I wanted to just lock you in.
Immortal? Yes, we're immortal.
All right. I love it.
Our vehicles are not immortal. Our vehicles kind of,
Yeah,
my vehicle is kind of wearing down. But we are immortal mind, universal mind, is it's an amazing thing to think about. And most people do not understand mind and consciousness, mind and conscious awareness. And I think that's very important to understand, that the mind continues. People confuse mind and brain. And I think that's another really important aspect to look at. And I can even read a science. I can pick up a book that a quantum physicist wrote about, kind of comparing Buddhism and quantum physics. And they still will talk about brain, the brain this, the brain that, and not mind. And they say, wait a minute, brain is the hardware, mind is the software. The mind continues. The brain, just like, when Einstein died and Princeton wanted his brain so they could look at it and see why he was so smart. And oddly enough, Einstein's brain looked pretty much like everybody else's brain. And so, okay, what made him so smart? Well, the mind, his previous lives, things he had achieved and accomplished in previous lives. And so mind is in the heart chakra. Mind is what continues. Mind is the seat of consciousness. And I think people need to understand that. And, you die, your brain dies, but mind goes on. Mind is the essence of everything you are, everything you have been. Not you maybe in a very specific way, but you in the essence of who you have always been. And I think that's important for people to know, so that maybe death isn't so scary. Your brain may die, but your mind is alive. Your mind is full of conscious awareness on whatever level.
Oh, wow. You even use it, it's similar to a term I say, the crystal seat of our mind is where our consciousness is. Talking about science, Dr. Hammeroff, he's an anesthesiologist. And then we have Sir Roger Penrose, and we have Sam Parnia. They're coming to the realization, which I know you're familiar with this. Wow, wait a minute. It's mainstream science has to admit that there's consciousness after death. Can you talk to us about that? I mean, I don't want to go away from this with you because it's so enriching. And so can you speak about these mainstream scientists that, hey, there's life after death and it's confirmed?
Well, I think it's been a long time in coming, but I think that quantum mechanics, quantum physics has really opened up that door to people and the science community looking at the mind and consciousness as something that is, it's new for them, and yet it's not new, because so many of them parallel Buddhist philosophy. That's the thing that got me interested in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, was our Buddhist studies. And they would tell us, one of the big things is, there is no out there. Everything is created in the mind by the mind, and nothing has any inherent reality from its own side. And so you look at during the 20th century, when quantum mechanics became a big deal, and you look at, the observer effect. You looked at the idea that nothing exists until it's observed, that if a scientist watches his experiment, what he thinks will affect the outcome of the experiment. You look at the idea of illusion, the illusion of life and death. Well, it is an illusion, because everything is created in the mind by the mind. It's illusory in the way that a magician performs illusions. Things exist, they just don't exist in the way we think they do. And so reading all these books that look at quantum mechanics and quantum physics as well as how these really brilliant scientists compare it with Buddhist philosophy, has really given me a whole new world of understanding. And, one of the reasons I teach my quantum Buddhism classes is because it really helps people understand how we create the world we live in. The world doesn't just exist out here waiting for us to come down and open our eyes and go, oh, wow, a world. But we actually create this world through our thoughts, through our imagination. There is no out there, as my favorite quantum physicist, Fred Alan Wolf, says. It's all in here. We create the world that we exist in. We create the world we see. We create all of our experiences. Nothing happens to us. We are creating the world we have.
Sorry, I was saying I love it and I agree 100% with religion. I deal with some very radical Abrahamic faith believers, of like Islam and even, Judaism and Christianity. So when I say, and some atheists, when I say everything is our concept, it goes through our consciousness. God is a conceptualization. Everything in our existence is our concept, right? It's
Right.
coming from us first. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. Now, let's talk about the way conventional medicine, like palliative care and even euthanasia arguments, the Holbrook, I think it's called the Holbrook Society. Let's talk about how people want to approach death from that particular, I guess, industry, right? Are they doing it all wrong?
I know if it's all wrong.
Okay. What do they do? What do they need to improve on? Let's take it lightly.
Well, I think we are seeing the idea of death being easier for people to accept, especially the medical community. There's palliative care in hospitals. There's the hospice organizations. There is the Death with Dignity Society. It used to be the Hemlock Society. Now it's the Death with Dignity Society. And I think it's the idea that people want to be in control, not only of their life, but of their death. And I think that, I know I talked a lot about that toward the end of the book, about the medical community and even the Dr. Hasselhoff, who said that watching people die in a hospital is terrible. He said people they won't leave them alone. They said they just, that one man grabbed Dr. Hasselhoff's hand and said, oh my goodness, he said, please tell them to stop. Don't do anything more to me, because other people want to direct whether or not you live or die. And it's really sad. It's really sad that we have to believe that if we just take enough pills, that we can live forever. And I think that we're not quite there yet. I think we still depend too much on the medical community and pharmaceuticals to help us live forever, maybe. And I think that that's a difficult way to go about it. And doctors don't even like to talk about death. I know the only doctor that really thought Brent was just great in the way he thought was the oncologist, the radiation oncologist, Dr. Tropper, who thought he'd never had a patient that was just okay with dying. Well, I can help you a little bit, but I don't think I can save you. And Brent's like, that's okay. I'm not looking to be saved. Maybe just help with the pain. And So I think it is difficult. And I think medicine makes it difficult. I think doctors make it difficult because they don't understand this stuff. Dr. Tropper went up to the Mayo Clinic after he had met Brent and I, and was attending a seminar given by a Buddhist monk on death and dying. And, you know, when you look at all the religions in the world, who concentrates more on death, including meditation on our own death, than Buddhists? And that's what really got me interested in death. I don't think anybody had ever told me, well, we need to think about our own death. You need to meditate on your own death. Meditate on the way you imagine you will die. And so that when it happens, it's not a big surprise. And I think that's important. If we can get people thinking that way and enjoying life and not being, you can't enjoy life until you have really accepted the idea that you're not going to be here forever. You know, no matter how many plastic surgeries you have, you know, all it will do is make you a really good looking corpse.
Wow, we're gonna have to use that quote. Yes, and thank you for correcting me. Hemlock, not Holbrook.
Yeah.
Wow. I have the landscapers. 1 second. All right, so sorry about that. I want to ask you, when you speak about Buddhism, can you talk to us about suffering compared to the Buddhist mindset and the Christian mindset of or just mainstream? When we hear about suffering, you know, it's like, oh my gosh. And then I know a little, I mean, I've never studied Buddhism on your level, but Eastern thought about suffering, compare it for us to Western thought.
Well, in Eastern thought, both Hinduism and Buddhism, suffering is a state of mind. Suffering is a response to something happening to you that you do not like. And you know, the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, the first one obviously is life is pain and suffering. And people go, well, why do I want to practice any spiritual tradition where the first noble truth is life is pain and suffering? I know that, you know. But then the second noble truth is there is suffering, but you only suffer when you want life to be different than it is. And the third noble truth is there is a way out of suffering. And the way out of suffering then is the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Noble Path, which is right thought, right action, right work, right, you know, the 8 rights, which it translates badly. It doesn't really mean right. It just means, you know, the way, you know, a beneficial way. It's beneficial. And so when we look at suffering and how not to suffer, I think Brent said it best. He said, you know, he says, if you write my obituary, don't say anything about I suffered. I didn't suffer. I didn't suffer because I never wanted my life to be different than it is. And I think that's really the key. When you're always going around wishing life was different than it is, then you suffer. You know, if you don't get the new car you want, then you suffer. If you lose your cell phone, you suffer. People suffer from different things, but basically all suffering is rooted in the fear of loss. When you think about when you suffer, you know, whether it's loss of health, loss of, you know, a loved one, loss of your car, your house, anything that you lose. And we can lose everything because, after all, nothing here is inherently real. And so it's easily lost. Everything is easily lost. And loss of life, again, that death is the biggie. And we suffer when we lose the people we love. But suffering is a state of mind. And you only suffer when you want things to be different than they are, instead of embracing it all as the path and learning what you need to learn from this path, because all is the path. There's no, oh, gee, I took a wrong path. I shouldn't have married that person. I should have stayed single. I should have married this guy, that gal, whatever. It's because all is the path. And so you just, you walk that path and you embrace it all, because that's all we can do. That way you avoid suffering. Sometimes you can't avoid pain, physical pain, but even that, you don't need to suffer. If you say, oh, I wish I didn't have this pain, you know, we get a pain, or we take an aspirin, an Advil, whatever, you know, we got to get rid of the pain. No, we don't want pain. And it's really difficult, because it's difficult in our bodies to not, you know, suffer physically.
Thank you so much. As you speak about that, we can't avoid pain, but it's about taking it on as a suffering, you know, right? You have to be able to look at it in a different perspective. The pain, you accept it in a way, right? So what about when you do have that person, you know, and you know all of you're balanced and you see clearly, you understand that there's immortality, but what about that part of you that really misses? And right now I'm getting emotional. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That part that even though it all makes sense, what about that part? Is that still, that's not considered suffering, or what is it? The grief, what is that?
Well, people do grieve, and we should grieve. Yes, but you can grieve and not suffer. Suffering involves putting me into the picture. And I know that when I was doing some hospice volunteer work after Brent died, I often saw people saying things like, oh, you know, oh, don't leave me, you know, their loved ones dying. Oh, don't leave me. I don't want to be by myself. I can't live without you. See, we've got that me, I injected into that person, when this is their karmic path. This is what they need to do. So I try to keep myself out of it. I can grieve for myself. Yeah, I realize I miss that person, but I am not going to interject myself into their life and make it harder for them to have a good death by saying, oh, don't leave me. I can't live without. Yeah, we do. Life goes on. But learning not to suffer is a practice. That's a practice. Everything in Buddhism is a practice. And you just, day by day, you practice and you practice. It's kind of like the old joke, somebody stops a cab driver and says, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the cab driver says, practice, practice, practice. And it's the same way with, it's just like, how do I get to enlightenment, or how do I learn not to suffer? Practice, 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 because that's what it takes. It doesn't come automatically. It doesn't come automatically.
Yeah, it's about discipline, correct?
Discipline, yes, discipline. Mm-hmm.
So as we go through life in this journey, and we go through all these different experiences, if we focus and continue to stay in tune with the source and stay disciplined, is that like when we say, okay, you've achieved nirvana? What I'm trying to say is it possible in this particular lifetime, or do we have to keep coming back?
Well, in Buddhism, they say there is a time when we do not have to come back. But we can desire to be a bodhisattva, which is somebody who chooses to return in order to help other people. Nirvana, remember, nirvana is a state of mind. Samsara and nirvana. Samsara is this world of pain and suffering, which is a state of mind. Some people just seem to breeze through life because they have a different mindset. Brent had a very different mindset than most people. Nirvana is the same way. Nirvana is a state of mind. It is a state of mind in which you no longer suffer. You embrace all as the path. It's not really a place. That's where, it differs from Christianity. Christianity, we think, okay, heaven and hell, and they're places. Heaven is up there somewhere. Hell is down there somewhere. But they're thought of as places where we go. And samsara and nirvana are not places, even though we say, well, we live in samsara. It is a state of mind. It doesn't have to be samsara. Every day can be nirvana if you have the right state of mind. And again, that's just practicing non-attachment. When you're attached to everything, when you're attached to people and pets and cars and houses and jobs, and that attachment will create suffering eventually because of loss. Suffering and loss. Attachment means you don't want things to change. But what happens when things change? Everything changes. All is impermanent. All is mutable. All is change. So when you learn to accept that, then you have a better attitude about everything around you, because you're not surprised when things change. You have these expectations that things will never change. Well, I say, expect nothing. You'll never be disappointed. Life just is what it is. And so you have to learn to embrace that and accept it. But it takes practice. It takes discipline.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. I don't know if you have any lectures that you're doing. Is there anything in the Valley that you do that you can mention? I'm asking for myself and for anyone else out there. Is there, because I heard you say you teach a class. So is there anything that you're doing that you can mention?
I do classes now and then for Theosophical Society groups, and usually Zoom classes around the country. And just, on the quantum Buddhism, I just gave one for the Denver Theosophical Society. And I don't really teach a whole lot of classes outside that. A lot of the places where I taught, they obviously closed for in-person things. And but I can, always available for, when events do come up. And I've done some things for Unity of Phoenix. I don't know if you're familiar with Unity of Phoenix.
No.
Yeah. And I've done some classes for them. I did a whole series this past summer. So
wow.
I can let you know.
I'm going to talk to you afterwards, but I want to ask you, when you said Theosophical Society, have you noticed that the more enlightened you become and the more you break Christian programs or Abrahamic faith programs, the more you're called, dare I say, not you particular, but I'm saying people in general, evil, going against God, but you feel you're most enlightened and the most, like the closest to the source, the spark that you've ever been. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I don't have, problems with any religion, really. I've been through a variety,
Yeah.
but everything taught me something and led me to where I am today. And I can always meet people where they are. I don't have any problems with anybody's belief system or anybody's religion, because there's truth in everything. But there's also ways that people can get way off the path in a lot of things. And I think we have to be careful. And I've always been careful about, even though I've been through different religions and so forth, I try to be careful and always remember that my truth is in here. I still have one of my books on Amazon that I wrote years ago called The Teacher Within, Finding and Living Your Personal Truth. Because to me, that was really key, is your personal truth. It's not me telling you what is true for you. It's me giving you my ideas, and maybe something clicks and maybe you say, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll go study that. But your truth is your truth. That's not my truth. And my truth isn't your truth.
Wow. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much. Thank you so much, Clare Goldsberry. And please go. I know that Esoteric will be putting the book in the description, the link to the book or how to find the book. And I know it's on Amazon. That's where I got The Illusion of Life and Death, Mind, Consciousness, and Eternal Being. And I think all of your books are on Amazon, correct?
I just have the one other one, the Finding the Teacher Within, Finding and Living Your
Oh,
Personal Truth. I have the
papers, right?
Stranger in Zion, which is my trip into and out of Utah Mormonism. That's free to read on my website.
Okay. I thought you had, are they essays then? They're not exactly books.
I have a lot of essays on my website. Yes.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope to speak to you again
Well,
soon.
thank you. I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
Esther.
it.
Yes.
Thank you.